चेंजेस इन द लेटर वैदिक पीरियड, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चैप्टर है ये। तो इसमें ऑब्जेक्टिव्स क्या हैं? आफ्टर रीडिंग दिस यूनिट यू विल बी एबल टू नो अबाउट द सोर्सेज विच इनेबल अस टू स्टडी द लेटर वैदिक सोसाइटी, the changes in the social, political, economic and religious structures during the later Vedic period, and the economic and social implications of a change in technology with the introduction of a new metal, that is iron. Introduction. The period which you are going to study now extends roughly from 1000 BC to 600 BC. By this period, some of the Vedic tribes had moved from the Saptasindhva region to the upper Ganga valley and other adjacent regions. During the period of this shift, a number of changes in their social, political, economic and religious structures took place. In this unit, we shall be discussing the major aspects of these changes. Sources. We get both literary as well as archaeological sources to study this period. Literary sources. The later additions, especially the 10th mandal to the Rig Veda Samhita and the Sam, the Yajur and the Atharva Veda Samhita are the other Vedic texts which are assigned to the later Vedic phase. The Sam Veda Samhita is a book of prayers and chants which are from the Rig Veda, modified and set to tune for the explicit purpose of singing them during rituals. The Yajur Veda elaborates the rituals which accompany the recitation of hymns. The rituals and the hymns in this Samhita document the social and political milieu of this period. The Atharva Veda contains the folk traditions of this period and represents popular religion. It is a good source for understanding the social religious conditions of the common people. These Samhitas are followed by a series of texts called Brahmans, which are commentaries on the Vedas. They explain the social and religious aspects of the rituals and throw light on the Vedic society. Although it would be wrong to take any period of early Indian history as the epic period as such, the two Sanskrit epics, the Mahabharata and Ramayana, are rich in information on different aspects of early Indian society. Historians believe that the core of what is reflected in these epics can be traced to the later Vedic phase. The geographical focus of the phase was on the territories of the upper Ganga basin and the middle Ganga basin, although other regions are also mentioned. In the epics also, the major events took place in this region. We also, however, remember that there is nothing to prove that the stories narrated in the epics were actual historical events. Secondly, both the epics took centuries to reach their present shape, so there are many types of societies which we may find reflected in the epics. Archaeological sources. The literary sources repeatedly refer to the areas of the western UP, Haryana and Rajasthan. The period assigned to the later Vedic phase is circa 1000 BC से 600 BC. Many communities and cultural groups are mentioned in the texts. Thus, particular pottery forms cannot be identified with some tribe or group. However, in the same geographical region, some agricultural communities flourished in roughly the same time bracket. These communities used a particular kind of pottery called the painted ware. Thus, these archaeological finds would reflect the material conditions of the later Vedic society. More than 700 PGW sites have been found along the upper Ganga basin. Their distribution extends from the dry beds of the river Ghaggar in Bahawalpur and northern Rajasthan to the watershed of the Indus and the Ganges in the Ganga Yamuna Doab. The eastern limits of this ware is restricted to the northern plains of the Ganges, as the site of the Sravasti indicates. Some important PGW sites are Ataranji Kheda, ch13, No, Hastinapur, Kurukshetra, Bhagwanpura and Jakheda. The Banas culture of the southern Rajasthan, which has been dated from 2000 to 1400 BC, may have possibly extended to the Ganges valley at around 800 BC. Thus, these black and red ware users can also be related to the present periods. Archaeology does not document the eastward shift of the Vedic Aryans, a shift which is suggested in the literary texts. Archaeology does not document any single culture shifting eastwards. Thus, there remains a large gap between the nature of the literary and archaeological sources. There is, however, the general point that the later Vedic society as well as the society reflected in archaeology was a society which had used iron. Iron objects are commonest to most of the PGW sites. The carbon 14 dates from Ataranji Kheda, Jodhpura and Noh suggest that in the context of the Gangetic plains, this metal was introduced around 1000 to 800 BC. The exploitation of the iron ore in UP, Himachal and Punjab and later in South Bihar was an indigenous phenomena. The Rig Veda mentions ayas, which may refer to iron, though the archaeological evidence relates iron to the later Vedic period. Literary sources provide ample corroboration of this. The Yajur Vedas qualifies ayas as Shyam ayas and the Brahmanas speak of Krishna ayas. Both the words refer to a black metal which means iron. Recent excavations suggest that the megalithic people of South India too were familiar with iron technology. Hence, we can no longer talk in terms of the introduction of iron technology into the Indian subcontinent by the migrant Aryans. Iron technology and its impact. An important question to ask here is, does the knowledge of iron lead to any advancement in the metal technology of the period? Similarly, one would also like to know the extent to which the introduction of new technology changes the material milieu of the society. The evidence of the later Vedic period suggests a transition from a pastoral society to a sedentary agrarian society. It was earlier suggested that the socket axes made of iron were extensively used to clear the forest and the Gangetic Doab for permanent cultivation. It was also believed that iron-tipped plugshare and hose increased the efficiency of the agriculture implements, which furthered agricultural activities. Thus, scholars believed that the knowledge of iron technology was an important factor for the development of agrarian economy. However, we now know that the later Vedic period was neither purely agrarian, nor was it well advanced in iron technology. The rich iron ore mines of Bihar were still not exploited, and the technology of smelting iron was primitive. The objects which are found in the excavations are iron-tipped arrowheads, spearheads, etc. That is, weapons of which the largest number comes from the ch13 excavations. Sickles, hoes, axes are rarely found in the excavations. One plugshare has been reported from Jakheda, which probably belongs to the end of this period. Thus, from the excavations, it appears that the use of iron was restricted to making weapons. Iron did not influence the agricultural technology until the second half of the first millennium BC, when the marshlands and monsoon forests in the middle Gangetic Valley were gradually cleared. In the later Vedic period, clearing of forest by burning was carried out in the upper Doab. We have the description of the burning of the Khandavavana in the Mahabharata to establish the city of Indraprastha. Iron-tipped weapons and horse chariots helped military activities which were rampant in this period and have been extensively documented in the Mahabharata. However, in subsistence-related activities, iron technology had practically no role. The nature of economy. The growth of agriculture in the later Vedic period was made possible by the availability of vast tracts of fertile alluvial lands of the Ganga Yamuna Doab and the Middle Ganga Valley, an area which was slowly settled through the first millennium BC. However, the later Vedic texts reflect the continued importance of pastoralism. Both archaeological and literary sources document the introduction of rice as the staple diet of the people. The PGW and Banas culture yield charred grains of rice from the excavated sites. The Vedic texts mention Vrihi, Tandul, and Sali, all denoting rice. It appears that cropping was practiced now, and the fields grew both barley and rice. The elaborate sacrifices of this period, example the Raj Soya, include offerings of grains along with milk, ghee, and animals. The 12 sacrifices prescribed in the Atharva Veda for acquiring material benefits recommended the gifts of cows, calves, oxen, gold, cooked rice, thatched houses, and well-cultivated fields to the Brahmins. The items of the offerings are a clear indication of the growing importance of sedentary settlements and agriculture. Later Vedic texts also refer to 8, 12, and even 24 oxen yoked to plug. Though the number of oxen mentioned is possible symbolic, the reference suggests that the plough cultivated was familiar in this period. Importance of pastoralism declines. Pastoralism was no longer the main subsistence activity of the people as it was in the early Vedic period. Mixed farming, which included cultivation and herding, was the occupational norm of this period. Agricultural activities in this phase were not labor intensive. The sites from where rice remains are found in the excavations are located on the elevated areas of the Doab. This suggests that wet rice cultivation, which is labor intensive, was not practiced as yet. Mixed farming led to the rise of sedentary settlements. The PGW deposits are generally 2 to 3 meter deep and indicate that people were living in the same spot for a long time. At Bhagwanpura and Jakheda, the excavations show that the earlier phase of circular huts made of wattle and dog or wood were replaced in this period by the more substantial houses with earth walls. Thus, durable materials were being used for house construction owing to the adoption of sedentary lifestyle. Changes in the functions of the rituals. In the early Vedic society, rituals were performed to bring about the welfare of entire tribe. Gods were worshipped for ensuring victory over other tribes, granting cattle and sons. It was also an occasion for the chiefs to distribute wealth. In the later Vedic society, the functions of the rituals underwent a subtle change. Rituals became much more complicated, which could continue for years. Thus, only the rich could perform them. The spirit of collectivity was reduced. Sacrifices were performed to ensure control over rest of the tribes. Gifts were no longer given to the entire tribe, rather, the chief gave gifts to the Brahmins who performed sacrifices for him. The rituals were so complicated that it needed expert Brahmins to perform it, since a wrong incantation could bring disaster to the performer. The performer of sacrifices was supposed to grant superhuman status to the chiefs, meaning that they were superior to the rest of the tribe. For this service, the chief passed on a large part of his wealth to the Brahman priest. Thus, the rituals became a mechanism for ensuring the material and spiritual superiority of the chiefs and the Brahmins. Emerging importance of land. Land was cultivated through family labor and the help of domestic servants and slaves. In this period, initially land was owned by the clans or the Vis. When clan ownership gradually changed to family ownership, the Grihpati or householder became a man of wealth. The Vaishyas, those who originally belonged to the Vish, were producing class in the society, and they became the source of wealth and subsistence for the Kshatriyas and Brahmins who did not actively participate in food production. The Vaishyas had to give prestation to the Kshatriyas in lieu of the latter, protecting their lands, and dan and dakshina to the priest for their moral upliftment. The Vis Vaishya, characterizing the householding economy, became the mainstay of economy. Prestations and dana to the non-producing classes helped in the distribution of subsistence goods. There are no references to the sale of land. Vishwakarma Bhavana, a ruler, was rebuked by Prithvi, the earth, when he tried to make a grant of land. This textual reference suggests communal ownership of land over which the Vis had major participatory rights. Polity in society. The transition from a predominantly pastoral to a mixed farming economy had a great impact on the character of the later Vedic society and polity. The main trends of changes were tribal identity of the early Vedic society gradually gave way to territorial identity, and consequently the nature of chiefship changed. The social structure, which was based on relations with the clan and was largely egalitarian in the early Vedic period, became much more complex. This type of society is marked by inequality. Even the same clan was divided into groups, some of which could have high status in society and some low status. Polity. Jan was used in the sense of people or tribe in the Rig Vedic period, but now the concept of Janpad emerged. Janpad means the area where the tribe settled. The word Rashtra was also used for the first time in the later Vedic texts. However, it was still not used in the sense of a state with well-defined territories. The Kurus, who were formed from the union between the two major Vedic tribes, the Bhartas and the Purus, are mentioned in texts as occupying the area in the upper portion of the Ganga Yamuna Doab. Similarly, the Panchalas are mentioned as the people who occupied the middle portion of the Doab, called the Panchala Desh. This indicates that tribal identities were merging with territorial identities. It is also stated that when the Kurus and the Panchalas came together, their authority over the upper and the middle reaches of the Ganga Yamuna Doab was complete. These changes in the relationship between the Jan and the area over which it wielded control helped towards the formation of the Mahajanpads and the Janpads by the 6th century BC. Tribal chiefs and warriors. When tribal groups came to be associated and identified with particular territories, it also brought about a change in the status and functions of the tribal chiefs. The Rajan or the chief was no longer involved only in the cattle raids, but emerged as a protector of the territory where his tribesmen settled. The Rajanya, which already was a superior lineage during the Rig Vedic period, now became a Kshatriya, those who held power over dominions, which is the literal meaning of the word Kshatriya. The Kshatriya class based their power on their role as the protector of their tribes and the land over which their tribes settled. The Vis had to pay prestations to the Kshatriya in lieu of the latter's protection, and thus the status of the Vis was progressively subordinated to the Kshatriya lineage. Bali and the Bhag no longer meant prestations given at will, but gradually assumed the forms of regular tributes and taxes. Tribal assemblies. The change in the status of the Kshatriya or the Varya class is also reflected in the changing nature of the tribal assemblies. The Sabha became more important than the Samiti during this period. Reference to Raja in the assembly or the Sabha suggests that they helped the king in their duties. And the office of the Raja or the chief was not based solely on birth, but the choice of Rajas was restricted to the Kshatriyas. Raja's legitimacy. In the absence of firmly established principles of heredity and primogeniture, consecratory rituals became very important for the ruler in order to assert this authority. Hence, ceremonial sacrifices like Rajasuya, Ashwamedh, and Vajpaya were performed on lavish scale. In the Rigvedic period, the Ashwamedha Yajna was a small affair. But in this period, this was performed to subjugate other areas and legitimize the ruler's hold over alien lands. The other yajnas included prayers for the ruler's health, and all three were in the essence legitimizing methods employed by the Raja to proclaim his superiority and power. For instance, the sacrificer was proclaimed as a Raja in the course of the Rajasuya. These sacrifices were found to be of relevance in later periods also, when new kingdoms and new monarchs emerged. They used sacrifices to give allegiance legitimacy to their power. The Raja was also required to integrate his territory with resources, economic production, and distribution, which enhanced his status considerably from a mere raider or a leader of battles. However, he was not yet the sovereign. The fact that he was elected and could be removed but put severe constraints on him, since he was answerable to the clan. Also, he did not appoint the other Rajas who helped him with his duties. They were chiefs in their own rights. What is important is that the Kshatriya lineage gained a distinctly superior status during this period. The reason being that the concept of territorial identity was established now. Thus, territory became the physical manifestation of the ruler's power to the rule. Tribal conflicts. The nature of the intra-tribal conflicts and conflicts within tribes also changed. Fights were no longer mere skirmishes over cattle. Now the acquisition of the land was an important element in these disputes. The necessity of increasing territory can be connected with the growth of population within the tribes. Iron weapons and light-wheeled chariots driven by horses raised the efficiency of the fighters. The Mahabharata depicts an intra-clan warfare between the Kauravas and the Pandavas of the Kuru clan. The priest. With the rising importance of the Rajanna Kshatriya, the Brahmins too became important, since they legitimized the office of the ruler through the consecratory rituals. The redistribution of wealth through Dan and Dakshina on such occasions was primarily from the Kshatriya Yajman to the Brahman priest. The elaborate consecratory rituals suggest that initially the power of the Raja was not so secure, and hence he had to provide proof of his ability to rule. The status of the officiating priest became at par with the gods in the later period. It was felt that the gods had to be propitiated with yajnas, and the officiating Brahmana had to be satiated with dana. Thus, the channel of redistribution was between these two higher status groups, and political supremacy was slowly becoming the domain of the Kshatriya society. We have already read about the declining status of the Vis and the ascendancy of the Kshatriya and the Brahmans. Society was thus composed of unequal groups. The hymns describe the origin of the four Varnas, that is Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, from the body of the universal creator Prajapati. The hymn of the primeval man comes from the later portion of the Rig Veda. Thus, hymns for the first time describe the origin of the four Varnas. The symbolism which is projected in these hymns is that Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra are limbs of the society. However, these limbs did not have equal status. The Brahmins were compared to the head, whereas the Shudras were compared to the feet. In social life, Brahmins were considered the highest Varna because society could communicate with gods and with the help of Brahmins only. The Shudras, on the other hand, performed menial tasks and included slaves captured in the wars. The concept of Varna. The system of Varna had the following features: status by birth, a hierarchical ordering of the Varnas Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra with Brahmans at the top and Shudras at the base, rules of endogamy and the ritual purity. The Varna system is further tied with the concept of dharma, that is universal law, and the Varna dharma was an attempt to establish a social law for the systematic functioning of the society. However, the Varna dharma system was not properly developed in the later Vedic society. The division of social groups was based on occupation alone, and society was still flexible, where one's occupation did not depend on birth. Even in the later times, that is post-Vedic, the Varna dharma described the ritual status of each group. The Varna system did not prevent the non-Kshatriyas from claiming Kshatriya status and becoming rulers. Examples being the Nandas and the Mauryas, nor Brahmins, nor from claiming political suzerainty. Example, Sangha King. Thus, the theoretical model of the Varna system could never be rigidly enforced in the post-Vedic period. It is likely that the later Vedic period, with the shift in the geographical focus, the Vedic people encountered many non-Vedic tribes, and considerable interaction must help the formation of a composite group. At least the Atharva Veda depicts a host of non-Vedic religious practices which were sanctioned by the priest. However, tribal endogamy through strict marriage rules was the aim in order to maintain the purity of the tribe. Also, the growing importance of the Kshatriya and the Brahmins in the society made it imperative to maintain their exclusive superior status as compared to the rest. During the later Vedic period, however, the concept of Varna was rudimentary in nature. The notion of untouchability, for instance, is absent. Gotra. The institution of Gotra, literally meaning cowpen, appeared during this period. As against tribal endogamy, marriage within the tribe, people practiced Gotra exogamy, marrying outside the Gotra. Gotra signified descent from a common ancestor, and marriages could not take place between couples belonging to the same Gotra family. The patriarchal family was well established, and the Grihapati acquired a special status. Since householding economy was gaining predominance, the position of the householder too acquired economic importance. The rights on land were based on usage, and communal ownership of land prevailed. The Grihapatis were wealthy, and the ritual role was that of Yajman, that is, who ordered sacrifices. Their wealth did not come from gifts, but was produced by their own efforts. Through yajnas, which they were bound to perform to gain merit, a part of their wealth got channeled to the Brahmans. Despite the presence of some women philosophers and the references to a few queens participating in the coronation rituals, women were considered subordinate to men and were not involved in any major decision making. 3 stages of life. 3 ashrams, that is, stages of life, were prescribed, and these stages were represented by the brahmachari, studentship; grihastha, householder; vanaprastha, partial retirement from householding life by living in the forest. It seems that the 4th, that is the sannyas, or complete retirement from active participation in the world. The 4th, the sannyas stage of life, was not known till the time that the Upanishads were written. The sannyasis, or the ascetics, in later period were individuals who protested either passively or actively against the Vedic social structure. Religion. The text of this period indicate 2 different religious traditions: the Vedic, which is documented in the Sam and the Yajurveda, Samhitas and the Brahmans, and the non-Vedic, or perhaps the folk tradition, extensively documented in the Atharva Veda. The fact that the Atharvan religious tradition was considered to be part of the Vedic suggests assimilation of different cultures and beliefs into the Vedic religious system. The Yajurveda Samhita and Brahmans document the sacrificial religion of the period. Sacrifices became very important during this period, and they assumed both a public and private character. The public sacrifices, example, the Rajasuyas, Bajpayas, Ashwamedh, were conducted on a massive scale where the whole community participated. Some of the rituals performed in the sacrifices show elements of a fertility cult. For instance, the Ashwamedh Yajna required the chief queen to lie next to the sacrificial horse, where the queen representing the earth, and this ritual was thought to ensure the prosperity to the king. A number of agricultural rituals were performed in the Rajasuya and the Vajpaya Yajna. The periodical rejuvenation of the earth and its fertility are some of the themes which were included in the ceremonial yagnas. Priestcraft. Later Vedic texts reveal the elaboration of the rituals, which were complicated and needed professional men trained in the art of performing them. Vidhis or rules for performing the sacrifices were formulated, and the Vedic sacrifices no longer meant simple offering of food, oblations into the fire. The types of offering, types of sacrifices, etc., differed according to the needs of the patron or the Yajman. Sacrifices were now endowed with mystical symbolism, and every ritual act was endowed with mysterious power. A new science of priestcraft emerged because of the complexities involved in the performance of these yajnas, whether private or public. Thus, a class of priests became specialists in the performance of yajnas. There were even different sets of priests for performing different stages of the same sacrificial ritual. The changing gods. Two prominent early Vedic gods, Indra and Agni, lost their importance. Prajapati, the creator, became important. This phenomena also represents the importance of sedentism now, since creation myths are important in the agrarian groups. Rudra, a minor deity in the Rig Veda, became important now, and Vishnu was conceived as the creator and protector of the universe. Pushan, who protected cattle in the former period, now became the god of the Shudras. The changing status of the deities are in indication of the change in the character of the tribes from pastoral groups to sedentary agriculturist groups. The early Vedic gods, who represented natural phenomena, were slowly discarded, and the personification of natural elements as divine beings became very complex. It was no longer easy to find the natural elements which represented a particular god from the hymns of the later Vedic period. Folk tradition. The Atharva Veda is a mine of information regarding the folk tradition. Its contents are radically different from the Vedic sacrificial religion, and it is concerned more with magic. The contents of this Veda cover different aspects of human life. The hymns deal with the cure of diseases. The hymns deal with cure for diseases, prayers for health, charms for the prosperity of home and children, cattle and field, charms to produce harmony, charms concerned with love and marriage, or conversely, rivalry and jealousy, etc. The Atharva Veda thus documents the kinds of superstitions and beliefs which were prevalent. The term Atharvan indicates a magical formula, and the Atharvan priest officiated in this religion. Gods of the Vedic tradition were invoked, but the reasons for which they were invoked were trivial and individualistic. Many godlings and spirits such as Pishachas, Rakshasas, and so on, some malevolent and some benevolent, were invoked either to bring good fortune or to cause havoc and destruction to one's friends and foes respectively. The invocations and the chants related to the domestic and the household, and were close to the daily cycles of existence of the common man. For example, Indra was asked to kill the house robber, the worm in the body, and the wolf devil. The Ashwins were entrusted with the protection of agriculture and the killing of rats. Savitri was summoned to fix a place where a new home could be built. Pushan was invoked to bring harmony and safe delivering of babies, while Surya was invoked to remove demons. Towards the end of this period, a strong reaction against the priestly domination and against the complexities involved in the yajnas resulted in the formulation of a philosophical doctrine which is enunciated in the Upanishads. These texts emphasize the knowledge of the Atma or the soul as against ritualistic practices and the wasteful expenditures which accompanied sacrifices. Thus, the materialistic aspect of the religion was discarded, and religion was raised to the realm of philosophy. The Upanishads emphasize the changelessness and indestructibility of the soul, which in a way seem to emphasize the need for stability and integration in a period when the Janpad and the Mahajanpads, that is, republics and monarchies, were emerging. Thus, we find that a great change in the religious beliefs and practices had taken place between the early Vedic and the later Vedic period. This change was partly related to the shift from pastoralism to agriculture. The religious changes of this period parallel and reflect the socio-political and economic changes that had taken place from the early Vedic to the later Vedic phase. So let us sum up. In this unit, you got to know that the Vedic society was changing from the pastoral later nomadic lifestyle to a settled agricultural society, but iron was yet to play an important role in agriculture. That in the process, well-defined political units were established, laws were codified, and a distinct social stratification emerged. that the Vedic and the folk religious traditions of this period were increasingly coming together while maintaining their identity. That in this process of change, some minor gods of early Vedic period, example Rudra, became more important, while the early important gods, example Indra, became less important. That both the literary and archaeological sources of this period have to be read together to get an overall picture of the period. Some keywords. तो consecration का मतलब होता है the process of giving importance or legitimacy. Consecration का मतलब होता है the process of giving importance or legitimacy. Folk tradition, traditions of the common people. Gift economy, an economy in which gifts play an important role in maintaining its institutions. Labor intensive, an activity where labor on manpower is used relatively more than technology. Sedentary, stationary or remaining at one place. Stratification, division into levels. Example, social stratification means division of society into different kinds according to some criteria. Example, caste, wealth, etc. Prestation का मतलब होता है सर्विस और ऑफरिंग रिक्वायर्ड बाय कस्टम और प्रॉमिस.